and that's important. How does it develop? And
Can you say a little bit more about how you see is tacit about it being unnamed, or what do you see? Like what would be the opposite of tacit?
So we talk about implicit knowledge and tacit knowledge. And implicit knowledge is something, skills you have but you don't talk about, which are skills which are kind of for you as a person are, it's well, that's what you do every day, but for others it may be skills, and you need to realize sometimes that there are skills inside you, strengths if you want to, which sometimes you don't realize, or you do them all the time, but it's you know, other people would say, oh, you're able to do that, so that's really, it's not a specific skill, it's maybe sometimes also a kind of a Haltung in English, attitude, mindset, these kind of things. And that's what you usually find out when you know a person really good, and even sometimes not. And the other part, and that's, and I'm talking about implicit knowledge because I think for community building and for community psychology, it's an important part which hasn't been too much tackled. So there's not too much research about implicit knowledge, and tacit sense or tacit knowledge is kind of the collective way. So many groups have their own experience, their own collective experience, which they again don't talk about. And some of these tacit knowledges or implicit knowledges, sometimes they are written down. And what we are doing when we're doing research with communities or also with organizations, we are trying to find out what is the secret knowledge you have, what is these hidden types of knowledges, because they are really important for being an organizational psychologist as well, for how a business would work. And they are really important also how a community would work. And that's the background. It's interesting that the European Union, and maybe it's in other parts of the world as well, they developed a so-called Faro Convention of Cultural Heritage. And they say cultural heritage goes way beyond buildings or art, pieces of art. It's really something which is about storytelling and history as well, because in many cultures, and it's clear that the cultural heritage is based on oral history. So people talk about it, but it's not written down. Ancient cultures as well. But if you look at our culture, not everything, even in an age of digitalization, not everything is written down. So, and I would say this is the more important things. And this is kind of part of these community stories. And so it's promising that the European Union starts to realize that as well. And maybe we should work on that level also, that others are realizing it. And what is this kind of storytelling? Why is it important? Oral history, why is it important? I refer to one of the giants of oral history, in a way, Stats Terkel, who wrote a couple of books about telling just stories of people and communities. And this is one story which I like most. It's a story of a 12-year-old girl working in a cigar factory in Cuba in 1910. And she was elected by the other workers as the reader or as the storyteller, because they found out, oh, it's important in not just to work, but also to educate ourselves. So they asked her, could you please read to us, or could you please tell stories? So she picked books or newspapers or their own stories, her own stories, and was sitting on top, like you see here. So that was the setting. So everybody would roll cigars, and she was telling stories. That was just one example, and that was pretty common. It was a rule somehow, like a union thing, that each cigar factory has a storyteller, and when she told stories, the others rolled 50 cigars and gave it to her, because she needed to earn some money as well. So that was kind of the exchange rate in a way. And that's pretty important, because that kind of supported not well-educated workers into education. So they kind of developed their own group and their own culture by doing this. That is one example. The other example is from nowadays. People start to develop their own community stories as well. This is an example from Nova Scotia. The indigenous people and the immigrants, so the former immigrants, they started a project which they call How We Thrive. One thing is to tell their stories, how they work and how they manage and how they survive in a way. The other thing is that they develop the art of hosting. So that is an important thing in indigenous cultures. So why is it important to develop the skill of hosting? It's not just, oh, hi, do you want some water? So it's much more. And it's a format which we could use, or which we do use in our communities as well. So that's one thing. And there's another group on the Gaelic community. So immigrants coming from Ireland or from Cornwall as well. And there's another group about food. So they developed a slow food company or slow food community. So that's another example. And the last example I'd like to show you is also in our new bank, where we collect these type of stories. This is close to my home in Germany, and local artists developed the idea to have an open column space, like a museum, but it's in the open, it's in the nature, so we can walk there. And he asked 121 artists from all over the world, could you please create a column for this space? And each column has its own story. And this specific column here has its own story. It was done by someone from Ghana, an artist from Ghana. And he tells the story about slavery in Ghana. Ghana used to be, slavery in Haiti, sorry. Haiti used to be the exchange point for slaves from Ghana to the US or to North America. And it was done by France. So Haiti belonged to France, and they took slaves and people like as slaves from Ghana and other African countries, brought it to Haiti and sold them. That's really something like, well, that was slavery. Sold them to African, to American planters or whatever. They wanted to be independent. Haiti wanted to be independent in in 1860 or something, and finally managed to be independent in 1876, I guess. And France said, okay, you can be, but we lose money, the profits from slavery. You have to pay us the profits for, which we lose from our slavery business. And they paid, Haiti paid until 1977, altogether over 40 billion euros to France. And France, it's a modern country, and it has been a modern country in 1977 already. And they took the money from Haiti all the time. And that is the story about this. So some of the stories have some political nature, and it's also telling a story about community building, like the people of Haiti got together and these kind of things. And these kind of stories we are looking for. So it's not just those big stories, that's a big one. It's also small stories about how communities go together, how they manage to develop a new way of relationship, a new sense of community. And that's maybe the important part. So that's what we are looking for, based on our idea of the new bank of community ideas and research, community ideas and solutions. And basically what we're trying to do is to find inspiring and transformative stories from different regions. And we decided, why don't we ask the participants here in the conference, because you come from different areas and you most of the time you have a lot of stories in your mind, which you may find, well, that's like a tacit knowledge. Maybe it's not really important, but now if I really think about it, oh, maybe that's a good idea, because they had a wonderful idea to do something new. For instance, in our place, during lockdown, musicians couldn't perform, so one of the musicians living close to my town, she decided, let's do a jukebox on the garden fence. So I'm sitting each day on 6 o'clock on my garden fence, if it's good weather, it's not raining, and I'm playing the accordion. I'm playing my instrument. I'm a professional musician, and you could choose from a box, what should I play? And you put it somewhere else, and you give me some money for that. So that's, and the interesting thing was not just the jukebox, but this created an own type of community during lockdown, because people went there. This was in the outside, it was safe, and so people got together to talk to each other and to just to be together, to develop a new type of relationship. So these kind of stories we are looking for. We're trying to evaluate them, try to develop or find out about their patterns built in. What is the successful part? Why is it successful? And why did they do it? What is the outcome of this? And so to not only to collect innovative ways of community building, but also to share patterns and to share the ideas to other places. So if we collect them, someone else could come up and say, oh, that's a good idea. I change it a little bit because it doesn't fit really to my community, but it's just a way how ideas come up. Okay, so that's why we asking you develop, bring your story. We are ready. Sam is here to record it, to make a short video. You could send it to us as well. You could write it down. But now it's the time and the opportunity just to tell a story, just like you tell a story. So it's nothing new. It's maybe about 3 minutes most of the time. Yesterday we collected about 4 stories, 3 minutes each. Doesn't take too much time. And you're contributing to a bank, and like a bank house. It's you're paying your story in a bank house, and you can withdraw other stories like money as well, and you can be inspired by other stories, and your story may inspire others. So that's the easy idea. Did you want to show the website?
I think is the one.
Yes. Oh, the website. Right. Okay. Yeah, wait a minute. The website is somewhere else. I have to, I find it, hopefully. No, it's, could you open, there wasn't a website open.
Okay, I'll just talk a little bit more about our process. I mean, a lot of this started, well, Wolfgang really started bringing different community psychologists together, particularly in Europe, together on Fridays. And some of us in the United States and other places started to join. And we were really sort of asking, what is the relevance of community psychology during the pandemic? And so we had a number of conversations and a number of initiatives. And this idea, this new community bank of ideas is one of them. And I mean, yeah, the idea that these stories are something valuable and that there's something that we should collect and understand. And I've had a long interest in stories. My favorite community psychology article was Julian Rappaport's Tales of Terror and Joy, where he talks about personal stories and community narratives, and a lot about how our identities are shaped by the stories of the culture and the families that we're in. And he has an example of, as individuals, we are on a canoe. That's our like personal, we've got our own resources and supplies and backpack, and we have some control over, steering that canoe, but it's the currents that also guide us a great deal. And we have our personal stories, but we also, those currents are kind of the cultural and community stories that we have and that we adopt and that we change our community story. And one of his definitions of community was, does a group have a shared story? And if it has a shared story, then it's a community. And so I loved that paper, and then decided to, as kind of a postdoc, to become a faculty. I had a faculty fellowship at Northwestern with Dan McAdams, who has a theory of personality related to stories. And so he's got several books and a data collection style of interviewing people about their stories. What was the high point of your childhood? What was the greatest experience? Who was there? What were you thinking? How does that impact who you are now? Questions like these. What was a transition point in your life? But I mean, that based on individualistic personality, we're trying to understand, how do communities come together and how do they do new and exciting, sometimes spontaneous things that involve not just one person's story, but a story of a community. And I am noticing that a number of our stories do have a single leader who took a step and did something. So it's not like the individual is not part of this, but eventually the collective comes in and starts to interact within this sort of play of events. And So that's exactly what we're trying to collect. Leslie, did you want to add anything? No.
And maybe you've at the website, do you hear me? Yeah. At the website, you find these kind of, we are starting with some, we have collected about over 100 stories up to now, and we are putting them on the website. This is a story of place of war. And they managed, and these women went together and said, let's do music instead of war. And so they created a music girls group called Girls without an I. And they are fighting against war. So they are fighting in their area because the men also go to war and become soldiers, and they are trying to redirect this process of violence and things like that.
It's kind of a counter narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we originally we started with writing down stories, but now we are having stories in video, and now we try again so that we can hear you, hopefully.
My name is Leslie Hatch Gale, and I live in the United States, right in the middle, in a suburb outside of Chicago, Illinois. And my story is about taking the power of connecting through the internet to discuss something and then moving that into real life and making real change for families in crisis. It all started in 2018 when there was a crisis at the border with families seeking asylum and being split apart, and the children and the parents were being split apart. And women in my community started talking about that on Facebook and sharing their disbelief and their concern. And the admin of the group said that the topic was too political and they needed to take it off the group. So one of the women started a new group, and she was looking for a name, and she went with 6,000 moms because she felt like the moms were the ones that wanted to care for these children and were hurting when they were learning about these stories about what was happening down there. And she had heard that maybe there was 6,000, she'd read somewhere a statistic that there was 6,000 moms in our area, and couldn't we harness the power of 6,000 moms? So she started this Facebook group, and we were sharing information. I joined the group, we were sharing information, trying to figure out what we could do. Can we do anything? Just somewhere to talk about it. And we, through the network, we learned of a family that had seeking asylum that was had been reunited, and they'd been moved to the Chicago area, and they were living in one room on one mattress as a family of 5. And we put it out to the group, what can we do? Can we do anything? And what do they need? And the next thing you know, someone's posting, well, why don't they could come live with me? I have room at my house. So phone calls were made and the family was moved. And all of this was shared within the Facebook group with permission from the family. And over time, we learned what kind of things we could offer based on what we had. Someone even knew a lawyer, so we were able to get them assistance that way too. And it just grew from there. We learned about another family, and we learned what worked about providing food for them. Or one time I went and provided babysitting services for an afternoon so the mom could take one of the kids to the dentist. And it just kind of evolved to where someone said, we should become a 501c3, become a not-for-profit, and they did. So now 6,000 moms, they work together. They say for the power to build up families and tear down walls is the mission. And they assist, comfort, and defend those seeking legal asylum in the United States. And they've done really good work.
Yay.
You finally didn't have to tell it. Okay, now it's time to share your story if you want to. And Sam will take your story, and you can just give it a try. There's no wrong, there's always right. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Maybe that's important. If you want to share, could you put the others again? If you want to share a story, it's always important in order to put it on the website. And of course, you receive the video before we put it on the website, and you can say no. But in order to put it on the website, it's important that we have a picture of a photo or a video. That's possible as well. And maybe if there is one, a link to a person, either to yourself or to someone who has told you the story, and maybe a link to an initiative like 6,000 Moms or something like that. Okay? So we are here, we are listening to your stories, and we are doing the recording if you want to. And if you have questions, just come to us and we will help you finding or putting down your story. Thanks very much.
Any volunteers?
Yeah, don't turn that on.
Is it working?
If you're not sure if you want to do it publicly, Sam could take you out into the hallway and you could just do it privately.
And if there are questions from the virtual rooms, feel free to ask as well.
How about I do a story?
I'll do a story. You do a story.
Yeah.
You take the mic.
Where should I? Oh, sit here and with the mic. Okay. Do we have a like a script thing or an outline or?
I don't have it.
We don't have it.
The
Oh, if not, I can just wing it. Oh. Good. Okay. Okay, I think I can do that without. So, you ready, Sam? Okay, so I'm Brad Olson from National Louis University in Chicago, and I wanted to share a story about a group of people in recovery. They started in the DC area, Washington, DC area, and it was a group of men, and their recovery home, professionally staffed, closed down, and they were all kicked out. And one of the gentlemen said, well, why don't we all just find a house, we'll rent the house, and we'll just live together in recovery. And so a lot of you know about 12-step programs like Alcoholics Anonymous. And pretty much the way that they ran this new house was according to the 12 steps. And they had just a few other simple rules. No one could drink or use drugs or engage in other behavior that would put that individual or other individuals in the house at risk, including temptation. And they needed to pay their rent, and they voted on everything democratically. And so the most expensive part of a treatment program is hiring staff. And so these men tried it, and they lived together, and they supported each other's recovery. And they always had 12-step meetings that they went to outside of the house. And eventually that one house, other people were interested from AA, were interested in joining as well. And so they came and said, you know, we'd like to create our own house. And so then another house built, and the two houses supported each other. And then eventually houses started, these are called Oxford houses. And these Oxford houses started growing in the United States, state by state. And right now there are thousands of Oxford houses around the world. So some of the nice things about this story is that people get to live together. They support getting professional help from doctors and psychologists, but they're really they're working their lives of recovery on their own. And they're never told, you can only stay here for 90 days. They can live there for the rest of their lives if they want. And one of the biggest risks of someone using again is to be back in the same neighborhood. So a lot of people go through detoxification programs, and then they get put back into those same risky environments where people are enabling them or tempting them with more drugs. But here they can live together and they can celebrate and have great experiences. There are some houses now, women with children houses, and even a men with children house, and bringing the children into the house brings up all sorts of other community elements and solidarity, and different people babysitting at different times. And overcoming substance abuse is never easy, but this is a model where people can thrive and be together and feel safe and help others. The end. Okay, so I did it. Anybody else? You all must have stories. Or just thoughts about the project. I mean, questions about our project. Oh, awesome. Great. See, stories begets more stories. So if one person tells a story. Yep.
Been quite reluctant to get in front of my own camera, so here we go. This is a story I actually shared with a colleague last night on the bus on the way to with Natalie. And it was, people are familiar obviously with the pandemic that we all went through, but in Melbourne in Australia, Naarm, otherwise known as Melbourne, where I'm from, we had particularly severe lockdowns where, to put it as nice as possible, were fairly racialized and social economic communities. They tried to lock down suburbs, particular suburbs. And in one instance, they found an outbreak in what we would probably call low-cost housing, social housing, high-rise, so a tower. And they were able to lock in the residents of that tower, policed at the bottom. And so one of the really amazing stories that came out of that, and what had always occurred in these, a multitude of diasporic communities that live in these towers, was the sharing of food and food knowledge and cultural sharing around food. But because they were locked in their homes, they weren't able to. So what they decided to do was develop a recipe book to still share, because they weren't able to sit and share meals together, but they put together this recipe book and distributed amongst each other within the low-cost housing. So they were still able to have this kind of cultural sharing, despite being, locked in their homes. And I love the idea of using very everyday things to still maintain a kind of a cultural connection, cultural sharing, and I guess some kind of resilience around food, which I'm personally obsessed with. So yeah, I think it's a great story. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. What do I say my name? All right. My name is Hajar Khalil. I am from the US and Egypt. I have a story about the power of stories, actually. I was working or interning at a women's vocational training center in Egypt. And there were women of various backgrounds. There were Sudanese refugees and Syrian refugees and Egyptians from lower socioeconomic status, all gathered at this training center with hopes of learning a skill that will help them, you know, provide financial stability for them and kind of provide an income. So we decided, I was there, my job was to create a space, coexistence group, because we realized that the three groups were not intermingling. Everyone stayed within their own ethnic group. So we decided to bring them together in a program. It was a coexistence program, and we were going to do activities together and kind of try to bond all together. And there was resistance at first. Many of the women were there. They wanted, you know, just to learn a skill, take it, go out and make money with it. And they thought that this program would be a waste of their time. They didn't see the purpose of it. And as we got started along the way, I also sat down. So part of the program was to sit down with each individual woman and listen to their story. On a side note, while I was listening to their stories, and many came from like very violent and were violent backgrounds and you know, were driven out of their countries because of war. But within their stories, there was a lot of inspiration and resilience that I had a lot to learn from. But after sitting with them and listening to their stories, and all I did was listen. I wasn't there to give advice. I wasn't there to do anything more than just to listen to their stories. And they started opening up to me. They started seeking me out to talk to me and just tell me their story. And they started to open up to one another, which also led them to help each other out. One woman ended up finding another woman a job. And by the end of the program, they came up to me and they thanked me for bringing them together and for this opportunity, where at first they were very resistant and didn't grasp, you know, the benefits or, you know, the idea of sitting around and talking. They wanted something useful, and they came out of it. All of them became friends. At first it was difficult for them to open up, and they had all these stereotypes in their mind of each other. And it was a space where they could talk and understand and listen. And they all ended up, you know, creating this bond that lasted with them. And later we would find them at this center just to hang out. You know, they're not there to attend a class or anything. So this was a story or an experience that taught me or made me see the power of telling stories.
That makes me think of, we had a workshop, well, you were part of the workshop. We had a question about anti-spark. Oh, right, I'm sorry about that. So we had a workshop the other day on resilience, and we had conversations about what brings about the spark, what happens. And so I'm just thinking with your story, I mean, so many thoughts are going through my head, but it's like, what is it about stories that do that? I mean, I think when we talk about communities are people that know a little bit about each other's stories. And when we walk and we see strangers, their story is silent. We don't know their story. And I think people are reluctant to get together. But I don't know, telling stories kind of makes people feel like they're family. Or I don't know, does anybody have, what is it about stories that bring people together? No one has to answer that. I'm just
We just had a session previously where Nick Malherbe from South Africa was talking about one of his small projects that he's done, which was involved with, which was a community making a documentary, a community that's largely presented their story. The dominant narrative about them is that it's violent, and there is a certain amount of it, but they made a documentary about the everyday life and just the everyday things that happen that presented as other than violent. And then they showed this documentary as a story about a community, and other communities started saying, so it's, in some ways, I think it's making visible the everyday, which is often taken for granted. He was thinking about it through this sort of anti-capitalist lens, which is also really interesting. So much of neoliberal capitalism tries to make that common sense, that we are all individual and all that. And this is actually making stories visible and telling, is bringing the everyday to some level of, I think, importance or yeah. So I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is something about the stories for the self and the others, the person and the political. So most of the people in community, they have assumptions about each others, but the stories are bringing kind of reality, and it really does something in challenging the stereotypes. So you think that your assumptions about people is different than the reality. So it is a new reality which can connect communities, and especially for those less privileged, less empowered communities, that it brings something that, I'm doing storytelling and narratives with women. So there is something about women all the time that we think that our story, it's all in our heads. And there is something about the society all the time telling us that you exaggerate, it didn't happen. So the stories is kind of validation for our lives. So it brings something in solidarity. And after that,
I definitely think that the stereotypes and the blocks that you're women, they have assumptions. Oh, is it time for another session?
What about the sparks? Your story, I think, was also an example not to go with the flow. It's just something against the flow. Because they had a new idea to live together and not stay in the way every other person like them would live in regular. And they know if we go on 10 years later, it's all the same. So I think it was just to put a stop in that flow and say, we are against it, like a fish is against the flow and not with the river. And I think this is, I remember another one, we had the experience, Wolfgang and I, many years when we worked together many years ago. Do you remember the building, Glückliche Haus, the happy house, from the people that are handicapped and in a wheelchair, and they did not want to go in an institution. They were young and were very clever, and they had also jobs, but they could not move. They were spastic things and those things, and they could not even articulate themselves very well. And they had the idea to come together because they lived in a kind of Pfennigparade. I don't know but it's an institution for young people. But in a certain age, they had to leave that institution and move into another institution again. And they were always felt that somebody takes care of them for things they could do by themselves. And so they gathered, and they had very open-minded parents that they had to assist for the first steps. And they gathered in a kind of formal organization, and they rented a house, and they hired a person, a professional one, and it was just a change in the role, because they were the ones who were the boss, and not a person in an institution that tells you, no, you get up and now we shut the windows and now you do this and that, and you have a small pocket money and something like that, and then you are like a child all your life, you know, and you never can do your own thing, and you're not even empowered to do something because it's against the rules or against the regulation that makes it more difficult for the professionals who working there. It's understandable, but for the person itself, that I think it is like being kept as a child for the rest of the life, only by sitting in a wheelchair and have a special kind of disease that they cannot articulate or eat on their own or things like that. But it doesn't mean that they are not able to make their own decisions. And I think that was for me, it was a perfect story that makes a kind of role model for other ones that were in a situation similar to them, and that they could gather and be a community, and that spread out, this idea spread out to also that the other was people being encouraged to come together for a model like that.
And you didn't tell us you were going to tell a story, because we could have gotten that on the website.
I'd like to add and maybe finalize this session, because the next session is coming in. Sometimes stories create stories, and that's maybe the secret. So the success pattern of stories, because once you tell a story, another story is told. We did once an experiment which didn't rely on real stories. We invented stories. So we had, I'm working in an institution which is helping startups to create business or something. And we decided, let's do fake startups. Let's develop startups which are not real, which can't be real in anyhow. And so we sat together and shared stories. So we just invented stories. And that was really fun, because at the end of the storytelling session, all of a sudden there came new ideas. So kind of dreaming stories is maybe as well a good tool to use in communities. So you dream your community, and we know it doesn't work, but once you start to think about what else could not work, it's nice that you all of a sudden you have a new idea. and that can work. So storytelling creates new ideas, creates stories, creates new ideas, are inspired. So we should use it quite more often. So thank you very much for being here, and submit your stories. They are the link is on the website. So whenever you want to, you can submit it per video, you can write it down, you can do an audio, and we will try to use it.